At 86, Lily Tomlin, a living legend of Hollywood, has shared rare insights about Rob Reiner, surprising many fans. These aren't scandals or controversial accusations, but rather behind-the-scenes truths about the man, his career, and the relationships he had to offer. Truths rarely heard directly from those involved. These revelations have opened up a different perspective on Rob Reiner, sparking much emotion and debate among film enthusiasts. What did Lily Tomlin say, and why did these revelations shock fans so much? If you enjoy behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories and want to explore lesser-known aspects, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. More than half a century has passed, and for Lily Tomlin, that time seems to have flown by in the blink of an eye. After all, what she emphasized wasn't fame or glamour, but gratitude for the opportunity to live true to herself, to express herself in the most authentic way. Yet, as the public scrolled through the sensational headlines flooding social media, many still thought they had the whole story. Another tragedy in Hollywood, another familiar tribute to a great name. But what Lily Tomlin shared before the stunned crowd was completely different from that cliché. Her unexpected statements overturned the familiar picture. It wasn't just a change in tone, but also revealed a much heavier layer of emotion hidden beneath the glitz and glamour of the film industry. This wasn't simply lamentation or nostalgia. This is the moment a candid icon steps into the spotlight, not to perform, but to speak out about what she believes has been buried for too long. A story many have whispered about, suspected, but no one has dared to publicly confirm. As Lily begins to piece together her memories and events, she reveals signs of unease that seem to have existed for a very long time. The public is accustomed to seeing Lily Tomlin as sharp, witty, and unafraid of the truth. But this time, she appears quite different. Her familiar confidence seems to have vanished, replaced by the weary eyes of someone who has carried too much unspoken. Her voice trembles slightly, her face heavy, as if keeping her promise of silence for so many years has finally worn down her spirit. When Lily speaks, it's not the usual witty remarks. She doesn't focus on the death or the tragedies recounted in the newspapers. Instead, she looked directly at her feelings and called them by a word that stunned many: betrayal. She spoke of a repressive culture where emotions and sensitive issues are pushed beneath the surface, making the truth difficult to accept. From there, Lily alluded to tensions in family relationships, suggesting that things are far more complex than the public is aware. Most people just skimmed the headlines and assumed it was another memorial. But if you listened carefully to Lily's trembling voice as she recounted a haunting phone call a few weeks earlier, you could clearly sense that something was wrong. In her view, the problem wasn't just personal pain, but the warning signs that went unnoticed. Lily argued that it was time to confront what was really happening behind closed doors, instead of continuing to mask everything with familiar and reassuring statements. While the rest of Hollywood chose silence or hid behind carefully crafted statements, Lily broke the silence in an unexpected way. She didn't talk about awards or glorious moments on set. She spoke about psychological pressure, the tension that permeated her living space, and private confessions that made her realize even the strongest people sometimes feel insecure in their own homes. To understand why these revelations were so shocking, one must look at the long-standing relationship between Lily Tomlin and Rob Reiner. This wasn't a superficial acquaintance forged at film premieres. They bonded during their time working together in a period when Hollywood was shaping its next generation of creatives. It was the depth of that relationship that gave Lily's words such weight, compelling the public to pause, listen, and wonder if certain truths had been overlooked for too long. They had been together for over 4 decades, not only in the spotlight but also through periods of weariness, heated arguments, and personal losses that were difficult to name. They shared the same ideals, the same circle of friends, and the same belief that storytelling is not just entertainment, but a way for people to confront themselves. When a friendship lasts that long, the boundary between friends gradually disappears. You become a silent witness to each other's deepest truths. For Lily, Rob was never just a powerful director or a celebrated cultural icon. In her eyes, he was a father struggling between love and helplessness, trying to reach a son who was increasingly distant. When Lily said she had witnessed giving to the point of exhaustion, both financially and emotionally, the atmosphere around them became somber. That statement wasn't accusatory, it was a painful acknowledgement of the price of kinship. What shocked those present wasn't just the content, but Lily's attitude. She rejected the familiar roundabout language of Hollywood, refusing to mask her emotions with safe phrases. She named her feelings, referred to specific moments, allowing the truth, from her perspective, to stand on its own. When the conversation touched upon the film Being Charlie, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Everyone knew that project was deeply personal. Rob directed, Nick wrote the screenplay, transforming personal experiences into a story often seen as an attempt at healing. But according to Lily, the film wasn't just art or therapy. She saw it as a subtle cry for help, wrapped in a cinematic language many had overlooked. Suddenly, the smiles at the premiere looked different. No longer simply joy, but a mask concealing unspoken emotions. We're used to believing in the beautiful story that's told, about forgiveness, about families reuniting, about a journey of redemption that brings peace to everyone. Lily shattered that narrative framework, not with anger, but with a heavy, honest frankness. She said that the tensions during the filmmaking process didn't stem from artistic differences, but from something deeper, expectations, unhealed wounds. According to her, Rob had hoped the project could help his son transform his deadlock into creativity. But in reality, the pressure only compounded things. Through her account, a different Rob emerges from the public's familiar image, not just a warm storyteller, a passionate activist, but a man struggling to balance responsibility, love, and the fear of loss. And it is this fragility, spoken of without hesitation, that makes the story unforgettable. But according to Lily, behind those glamorous cameras was a man living in an invisible fear that even a small spark could ignite an explosion. In private, he wasn't the steadfast, confident image of a Hollywood big shot. He cautiously observed every reaction in his own home, choosing his words carefully in the hope of maintaining a fragile peace. And then, a detail that silenced everyone emerged, a story never publicly told. Lily mentioned a dinner party at Reiner's house where she was present. Her description sent a chill through the air. It wasn't just ordinary tension, but an indescribable suffocation. The guests sensed something was off, as if everyone was trying to appear normal while a silent confrontation unfolded before their eyes. According to Lily, Nick's behavior that night wasn't impulsive or chaotic. On the contrary, it was remarkably calm. Every smile, every joke, every glance across the table seemed carefully calculated, as if orchestrated to touch upon the other person's weak point, deep enough to elicit a reaction. The image that troubled Lily the most was Rob. The man who once commanded an entire film set with familiar confidence now sat there, trying to turn the heavy atmosphere into a joke. He was trying to recapture the naive charm that had made him famous, hoping laughter could mend what words couldn't. But this wasn't a comedy. There was no applause to save the day. This was real life, where insecurity was palpable, challenging any attempt to pretend everything was all right. According to Lily, it was moments like these that changed how she perceived the entire story. For so long, the public had thought it was all just a moment of overwhelming emotion, a sudden breakdown, an unforeseen tragedy. But Lily's perspective told a different story. She believed it was the result of a long-term buildup, of resentment, hurt, and unresolved conflicts. It wasn't a coincidence, but a long, simmering process, beyond the soothing power of family or money. Just when everyone thought the story was over, Lily revealed another layer: money. She spoke about it not harshly but clearly enough to silence the entire audience. According to her, behind the Hollywood lights are complex financial pressures, invisible bonds that can hold people together in unimaginable ways. Lily hinted that Rob had recently made a difficult decision, ending years of financial support for their son. She called it the end of indulgence. A final line had been drawn. According to Lily, that decision didn't come from coldness, but from what she called harsh love. When a father realizes that continuing to help might no longer be salvation, but rather delaying the inevitable. She repeated Rob's exact words to her. He had to stop, even though he knew it would be painful. The room fell silent as those words echoed. Hearing them again in the context of what followed, a heavy feeling enveloped everything. What had once been seen as a turning point of hope now became a haunting symbol of the fragility of all attempts at loving. According to Lily, that decision not only changed their relationship, but also completely distorted the atmosphere in the house. Everything became heavy, as if a storm was silently brewing beneath their familiar roof. The reporters present that day said that just looking at Lily was enough to understand. Her body spoke volumes. There was suppressed anger that trembled, an undeniable helplessness, and mixed in with it a deep sense of guilt, as if she carried the burden of something she had known for a long time. Lily admitted that she understood that what was happening behind closed doors had gone beyond the ordinary. The family was not only facing emotional rifts, but also living in a state of constant tension. She confirmed that in the past there had been incidents that should have drawn public attention, but then they all quietly disappeared, pushed out of the headlines by powerful legal teams and carefully crafted statements. That's the part that sends chills down the listener's spine, a reminder that fame and power can easily bury what no one wants to see directly. Lily spoke of Hollywood as a place where money and confidentiality agreements could obscure reality behind the walls of opulent mansions. The perfect smiles on the red carpet were sometimes just a thin mask concealing the chaos unfolding within. She confessed that she had repeatedly begged Rob to protect himself, to hire security, to change the locks, to seriously confront the situation before things spiraled out of control. But Rob, in his familiar calm voice, had only one answer. Lily's voice choked as she repeated his words. How could he lock himself away from his own son? He said his son was sick, that he wasn't a bad person. That statement echoed through the air like a clap of thunder. It wasn't simply a father's defense, it was pain encapsulated in denial. Lily says that quote still haunts her to this day, and it haunts those who listen, because it reflects the tragedy of so many families trapped in the same cycle. Not a monster, just a person in pain. That's the fragile line many parents grapple with every day. It's the struggle between love and fear. It's the desperate hope that compassion can heal what control cannot. In that moment, one can clearly see the tragic blindness of unconditional love, the refusal to acknowledge the danger when it comes from the person one loves most. Lily Tomlin forces the public to confront a difficult truth. Rob Reiner's greatest strength, his profound compassion and rare capacity for empathy, may also be his greatest weakness. The heart that helped him tell stories that moved millions on screen rendered him powerless in his personal life. He couldn't see his son as a threat. He saw only a wounded human being, a person in need of help, a person he believed could be healed by love and patience. Lily made that very clear. Rob didn't see danger. He saw a wound. And in his mind, that wound was his responsibility. It was heartbreaking to think that the tenderness that had shaped him, that had made him a great artist, could also have left him defenseless when it mattered most. But Lily didn't stop there. What Lily revealed about Michelle Singer Reiner, Rob's wife, was even more heartbreaking. Michelle had long been seen as a quiet artist, a behind-the-scenes figure, providing a stable foundation for the family amidst the relentless flow of creativity. She didn't seek the spotlight. She observed and documented the world through photography and art, choosing to stand on the sidelines rather than at the center of the stage. But according to Lily, behind that calm exterior was a person worn down to the core. The word Lily repeated wasn't anger nor resentment, but exhaustion. Exhausted by an endless cycle of hope, disappointment, forgiveness, and then heartbreak, repeating until she had no strength left to resist. Lily made it clear that while the public saw Rob as the family's emotional pillar, it was Michelle who silently bore the daily burden of fear. Unlike Rob, who still clung to the belief that love could heal all wounds, Michelle seemed to have entered a different state. No more romance, no more vague hope. Only survival instinct remained. Lily described Michelle as someone with keen intuition, someone who sensed instability even when those around her deliberately ignored it. Then Lily recounted a detail that silenced the entire space. A detail that wasn't noisy, not dramatic, but chilling. Michelle had confessed that she hid knives all over the house, not because of violence, but because of a constant fear. Imagine that, a magnificent Brentwood mansion filled with images of success and glorious Hollywood memories, yet a place where a woman didn't dare leave a kitchen utensil in its usual place. Lily's voice choked as she described the scene. A famous family, perfect smiles for the cameras, while behind closed doors lay an atmosphere as tense as a dark psychological drama. The glamour the public saw turned out to be just a surface reflection. Inside was a house fraught with anxiety, where fear permeated every hallway. What made Lily's words particularly impactful was that she had no personal reason to speak out. She wasn't promoting the project. She wasn't seeking attention. This was a person who already had enough fame, enough respect, and owed nothing to Hollywood. Stepping out of her comfort zone meant accepting risks. From that moment, Lily understood she was sacrificing a great deal: relationships, peace of mind, even inner tranquility. But she said that silence was the only thing that couldn't continue. She called it a culture of silence, where sensitive issues were buried behind money, power, and secretive deals. And this time, she refused to follow that rule. Lily no longer spoke vaguely or hinted ambiguously. She called for a look at the whole picture, considering the recurring patterns rather than focusing on a single moment. When Lily stated that the truth didn't emerge overnight, but had been brewing for a long time, her words carried a different weight. It wasn't speculation, but the perspective of an insider who had observed for years. When she mentioned the scars of trauma she had witnessed, the entire room fell silent. The feeling of entertainment was gone. Only the seriousness of the issue being raised remained. Lily emphasized that speaking out wasn't about shocking, but about preventing similar tragedies from happening again. From that moment, the story seemed to transcend public opinion or social media. It moved into a different space where legal arguments, professional assessments, and social responsibility would speak. While the defense attempts to interpret everything from the perspective of psychological crisis and personal circumstances, Lily's account opens up a broader picture. A long history of unresolved tensions, simmering pressures, and warnings that were once spoken but went unheard. And it is this that is forcing the public to look at the entire story in a completely different light. This is no longer simply an expression of emotion or personal confession. What Lily is doing is expanding the picture, placing everything within a clear, cumulative timeline, a story that doesn't originate from a single moment of chaos, but is formed over years of tension, avoidance, and delayed decisions. This is what makes Lily's sharing particularly weighty. She's not just recounting a family tragedy, but is raising questions about responsibility, about who knew, who saw, and who chose to remain silent. Every word compels the public and those in authority to stop, to look directly at what may have been hidden for so long. Lily doesn't beat around the bush, nor does she downplay the issue. She describes a cumulative emotional state where anger stems from a feeling of being cut off, marginalized, rather than just momentary bewilderment. And it is this subtle difference that changes how people perceive the entire story. It's a fine line between a person being seen as a case requiring special assistance and facing more serious legal consequences. Lily's words, though just a personal perspective, carry significant weight in influencing how public opinion and the legal system approach this issue. Equally noteworthy is Hollywood's reaction, or rather, its silence. That silence resonates so strongly, it's hard to ignore. Tributes to Rob continue to appear regularly, carefully written, respectful, mentioning his artistic legacy, classic films, and undeniable cultural contributions. But there's a clear void. No one directly addresses the most difficult part of the story. No names are mentioned. This avoidance is not accidental. Lily has crossed an invisible line, an unwritten rule long maintained within the industry, that the darker sides of fame, especially those involving family, should be kept private. This topic is unsettling for many, as it forces them to acknowledge a difficult truth, that money, therapy, or good intentions aren't always enough to heal deep-seated wounds. It's taboo to think that even love, however genuine, can reach its limits. Lily has broken that comfort zone. What she says reflects not just one specific family, but a mirror of the entire Hollywood ecosystem. It makes parents in the industry, producers, actors, and those silently grappling with their own family problems wonder if the same could happen to them. Because if such a story could happen to Rob Reiner, who was considered mature, compassionate, and empathetic, then it wouldn't exclude anyone. And then, just when everyone thought Lily had said enough, she touched on an even more painful point: isolation. She spoke of it softly, without drama, yet it resonated powerfully, because behind the fame, recognition, and superficial relationships lay the image of a family gradually withdrawing into silence, a house full of people, yet inexplicably empty. This irony left many people pondering. A figure of great influence, widely loved, facing a personal struggle in solitude. Lily shared that despite being surrounded by powerful friends and abundant resources, Rob chose to withdraw emotionally. He didn't try to protect himself. He tried to protect his son. From Lily's perspective, Rob prioritized his son's dignity and future over his own safety. He didn't want sensational headlines, rumors, or public judgment to haunt his son for life. Therefore, he chose silence, believing it could be a shield. He hoped that if things were resolved discreetly within the family, his son would still have a chance to start over, to be seen as a person rather than just a collection of mistakes. But Lily calls this a painful paradox, because that very loyalty and protectiveness, though stemming from love, may have inadvertently removed the necessary safeguards. And that's what makes this story no longer just a personal tragedy, but a cautionary tale that prompts many to pause and reflect. Lily's voice trembled slightly as she spoke of things that could have taken a different turn. If the signs of trouble had been recognized sooner, If the disturbing events had been fully documented instead of being ignored for the sake of fame and privacy, perhaps the story wouldn't have spiraled so far. Sometimes just a timely decision, a necessary distance, or a moment of timely intervention is enough to change the fate of many people. But the carefully guarded boundaries that Hollywood always maintains, the silence seen as a protective shield, ultimately inadvertently erected invisible walls, leaving Rob to confront his fears in solitude. And now, with everything exposed, all that remains is an unbelievable, heavy, and agonizing shock. The waves of emotion from Lily's words quickly spread to fans everywhere. Generations have grown up with Rob Reiner, the artist who brought charming laughter to the screen, the talented filmmaker who told us stories that shaped our views on love, friendship, and hope. The public is familiar with the image of a warm, approachable Rob, always instilling faith in the good. But when Lily recounts private moments, her voice softens, and listeners suddenly realize that behind the spotlight lies a very real person, with silent anxieties and sleepless nights that few see. Behind all the laughter and beautiful ideals is a man quietly facing his own nightmare. This makes the story more heartbreaking than ever. Lily's sharing reminds everyone that even the brightest stars are not immune to darkness. Fame is not an absolute shield. Success is not a safe haven. The world sees a legend. Meanwhile, Lily sees a friend slowly sinking into silence, struggling to balance the heavy burden of responsibility, deep affection, and growing anxiety. Rob's works, once considered symbols of justice, truth, and the belief that passion and morality can overcome adversity, built his reputation by telling stories where good people don't give up, where integrity prevails, and where light ultimately shines through the darkness. Therefore, when confronted with such a harsh and relatable reality, the irony becomes heavier than ever. It's as if reality has bent the emotional rules he painstakingly cultivated over decades. Lily Tomlin seems to sense this contradiction as well. Her eyes reflect her unease as she acknowledges that real life doesn't always follow happy endings. In Rob's films, love can save people, truth can prevail, and families can reunite after a breakup. But in real life, Lily says, sometimes love isn't enough. There are times when, no matter how hard you try, illness, pressure, and emotional turmoil can drown even the most steadfast hopes. Then came the detail that silenced the room: the lost notebooks. Lily recounts that Rob was an incredibly meticulous keeper, pouring his fears, plans, anxieties, and hopes of fatherhood into every page. He wrote about family milestones, his private worries, and how he tried to understand and protect those he loved. Lily says Rob confided that he recorded everything, every little detail, as a way to remind himself not to miss anything important. When she questioned the fate of those notebooks, the atmosphere suddenly became heavy, as if everyone understood that they were more than just paper and ink. The question resonated like a silent challenge, not intended to accuse anyone, but to remind everyone that pieces were still missing. What had once been considered a family tragedy now took on the nuance of an incomplete mystery. If those notes were found, if they contained the anxieties and warnings that Lily believed Rob had shared, they could become the final self-narrative, a record of early but irreversible signs. Attention then quietly shifted to those who remained. The two surviving children, Jake and Romy, now stood before the shadow of loss, bearing the legacy of incomplete memories and truth. Lily chose each word with extreme caution, as if walking on broken glass. She did not exaggerate the pain, nor exploit the tragedy for emotional effect. She defended those who were still trying to stand firm amidst the ruins. When Lily mentioned Rob and his family, empathy was evident in her voice. She spoke of the pain of those left behind with profound respect, acknowledging the emotional storm they were facing each day. There was no judgment, no hasty conclusions, only listening and sharing. And in that silence, the story was no longer about glory or collapse, but about people, fragile, complex, vulnerable, and above all, deserving of understanding. Try to imagine that for a moment. Losing both parents, then facing the truth that the person at the center of all those events is your own brother. And to top it all off, witnessing your closest friend, the person your parents trusted completely, step forward and reveal the family's deepest secrets. It's an indescribable whirlwind of emotions, chaotic and painful, far beyond anyone's normal endurance. But what Lily did clearly shows one thing. She didn't come forward for fame, nor to create a sensation. She did it because someone else forced her to. According to those close to the case, Jake and Romy were advised to remain silent throughout the ongoing legal proceedings. They couldn't speak up on their own, couldn't defend their story against public opinion. Lily, however, could. And so, she accepted stepping in front of the cameras, accepting the skeptical, even critical gazes, to speak on their behalf. She became the scapegoat so that Jake and Romy wouldn't have to relive their pain in public. It was her final act of profound loyalty to Rob Reiner, and also her attempt to protect the children who still had a chance to rebuild their lives from the ashes. Then came one of the most tense moments of the entire press conference. A reporter, clearly seeking a shocking answer, asked the cruelest question of the day. Did Lily blame herself? The room froze. Cameras flashed continuously. Lily bowed her head, her gaze fixed on the microphones in front of her, as if they weighed her down more than ever. She didn't answer immediately. The silence was so prolonged it was suffocating. Finally, she spoke, very softly. We all thought we had plenty of time. Her voice choked as she continued. I thought this was just a phase. I thought surely it wouldn't go this far. I blame myself for believing that logic could apply in this situation. Those words didn't sound like ostentatious remorse. They were like a surging wave of emotion, the voice of deep hurt. It was a moment of realization that love, reason, and hope are sometimes powerless against what began long ago. Lily wasn't just talking about herself. She was speaking for all those who have looked back and wished they had seen sooner, done more, or acted more decisively. That feeling was real, raw. And that is the emotional truth behind every subsequent headline, something no words can fully capture. The moment Lily admitted her self-reproach led to a deeper truth, touching the hearts of her listeners. It was the painful realization that rational people often try to use logic to solve situations that inherently defy logic. Rob Reiner was the embodiment of such a person. He always believed in dialogue, in the power of persuasion and understanding. Throughout his career, he reasoned with studio executives, politicians, and the public, and often succeeded. He believed that with enough patience and sincerity, you could find a way out of any problem. But as Lily painfully stated, Rob tried to apply that belief within his own home, and that's where everything fell apart. She frankly admitted that he believed he could reason with chaos, that he could use calmness and love to control something that was beyond his control. That mistake, that excessive belief in the power of reason and kindness, ultimately caused him to lose everything he held dearest. Now things seem even more tense and complicated. Many are beginning to ask, why now? Why did Lily choose to speak out now instead of waiting for things to calm down, waiting for the trial to take place, or letting the legal process proceed in silence? According to those familiar with the case, this timing is not at all coincidental. Significant legal developments are imminent, and this context gives Lily's decision a very different meaning. In the coming days, there are expected to be review sessions regarding her detention status and subsequent management measures. In such situations, there is always the possibility that the defense will present humane arguments, such as proposing lighter options instead of the harshest measures. Given the family's reputation and the intertwined emotional factors, Lily's timing in appearing in public becomes all the more understandable. What she said wasn't just driven by emotion. They are proactive, even calculated. By explicitly speaking about fears, lingering tensions, and signs of instability, Lily has made the story no longer a mere personal tragedy. Her words create powerful public pressure, forcing any decision to be more carefully considered. Whether one agrees or disagrees, it's undeniable that Lily has ensured one thing. This story will not be softened by glamour, by sympathy for fame, or by a desire for a quick resolution. Every word she speaks is not merely a recollection or a recounting of memories. It is an act to keep the truth from being obscured, from being transformed into a more acceptable version. Lily is in control of the story, preventing it from drifting along the familiar inertia of Hollywood, where sharp edges are often smoothed out by image and power. She was doing something many in similar situations couldn't or wouldn't dare to do, confronting the issue directly, without avoidance. And that's what changed the overall atmosphere. Initially, public sentiment was primarily sadness and grief. People were heartbroken by the passing of a great name, an icon associated with the memories of many generations. But then that emotion began to transform. Sadness gradually gave way to outrage. On social media, in discussions, you could clearly feel that shift. People were no longer just mourning, they were asking questions. They were outraged by the prolonged silence, by the feeling that serious issues had been ignored for too long. Lily became the catalyst for that shift. Collective grief was no longer just regret, but gradually transformed into a voice demanding fair judgment. She forced the public to see Rob and Michelle Reiner not as distant symbols, but as human beings, elderly parents, vulnerable, who should be protected and safe in their own home, and that's what truly shocked many people. Because Lily brought to light a topic that society often avoids, the vulnerability of older adults within the family, a problem often whispered about, hidden behind the word private, especially when it intersects with mental health and reputation. Lily broke that polite silence, not with harsh condemnation, but by forcing people to confront reality. She painted a disturbing picture: two elderly people increasingly frail and weary, both physically and mentally, while other instabilities dominate their entire living space. It's an imbalance that listeners cannot ignore. And when that picture was set in motion, the story no longer revolved around celebrities. It became a story of vulnerability, of the silent pain that exists in many families, but is rarely spoken of because of fear, shame, or not knowing where to begin. Now, as the story moves into its next phase, the atmosphere surrounding it becomes unpredictable and tense. Everything seems to be building up, ready to erupt in unforeseen directions. The coming days promise to be turbulent, and no one can pretend that this is just a story that can quietly fade away. The media exploded, legal proceedings became convoluted, and emotional clashes intensified. Lily didn't simply speak out. She exposed a deeper layer, one that transcended the boundaries of a single tragedy. And once that happened, there was no turning back. It was almost predictable that Alan Jackson and Nick Reiner's legal team would immediately get into gear, scrutinizing every word, preparing cease and desist notices, and considering every legal possibility to protect their client. They might argue that Lily had exaggerated, that she was driven by emotion, that she was merely an outsider, lacking full knowledge of the case or the complete medical context. Such arguments might be made, along with attempts to downplay the message and question her credibility. But the reality is, the story has spiraled out of control. Once those words were made public, once public attention was captured, no one could undo their impact. In the eyes of many, Lily Tomlin is more than just a famous face. She is a long-respected figure, associated with frankness, courage, and personal integrity. This is what makes the public listen to her in a different way. When Lily speaks of fear and insecurity, the public reaction isn't skepticism, but empathy. Not because the court has delivered a verdict, but because listeners sense her sincerity. Justice operates on evidence, but public trust is formed from emotions and personal history. And at this moment, that trust is leaning toward Lily. This creates a crucial turning point, because when a person of sufficient credibility breaks the silence, others begin to wonder whether they should continue to remain silent. You can almost feel the atmosphere shifting. Stories that had been kept secret for years suddenly become the subject of whispers. Those who had been on the sidelines are beginning to consider speaking out. Will more of Rob's longtime friends share their perspectives? Will those who worked with him, who witnessed the difficult times behind the scenes, confirm or deny what Lily has hinted at? That's often how long-standing secrets in the entertainment industry are gradually revealed. Not with a single explosion, but with a chain reaction, piece by piece. Lily Tomlin, in many ways, has made the first move. Her voice has created cracks in the wall of silence that had been built up over decades. And now, attention is focused on the question, who will be next to step forward? Because once the truth, or at least the serious questions, have been asked, it's hard to stop the flow. What Lily did wasn't just shattering a glamorous facade. She shifted the focus from protecting an image to protecting the truth, however complex, painful, and difficult that truth may be to accept. The story no longer revolves around fame or artistic legacy. It returns to the core of humanity, to the very real wounds behind the spotlight. What is revealed is not a fleeting sensational headline, but a profound pain, bearing the hallmarks of a classic tragedy. It's hard not to feel the irony within. A person who dedicated their life to bringing laughter, warmth, and faith in human values to the public ultimately faces tragedy in their most private space. Not on stage, not in front of the cameras, but behind seemingly safe walls. And it is this very contrast that makes this story continue to haunt, preventing it from simply closing as a news story and quickly being forgotten. The house, once filled with memories, trophies, and love, has become a symbol of an unwanted family tragedy. This contrast is poetic in its most cruel way. The place built to provide shelter is now the place where everything crumbles. In her rare recollections, Lily reveals another layer of haunting, the feeling that Rob Reiner had a premonition of impending doom, not through evidence or prophecy, but through the intuition of someone who has experienced too much. He sensed the storm brewing, as if seeing the clouds approaching from afar. According to Lily, he didn't try to avoid it. He didn't leave. He stayed, doing what many fathers do when faced with vague danger, standing firm. She describes him at the threshold, the fragile boundary between order and chaos, between hope and fear, trying to hold on to what he could. It was a moment both serene and heavy, where love became the sole driving force, even though that very love could shatter a person. That image, a steadfast father amidst a whirlwind of emotions, is hard to erase from anyone's mind. Thanks to Lily's courage in breaking the silence, the questions that had been hanging in the air became clearer. Not accusations, but an invitation to reflection. The fragmented pieces, contradictory details, gaps in memory, unspoken things, began to be examined with greater caution. In the face of growing attention, Lily offered a simple suggestion. Stop and think. Think about what had been said, about the silence behind the laughter, about the truth that behind the glamour sometimes lies unnamed pain. public attention intensified, sparking lively discussions on talk shows, podcasts, and entertainment news. What began as a private tragedy has now become a broader dialogue about family, responsibility, and what the public doesn't see. People are discussing, analyzing, and comparing old interviews, trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind each gesture. Not to jump to conclusions, but to better understand the person behind familiar works. Meanwhile, Lily chose silence. She didn't appear. She didn't speak further. This silence, according to many, wasn't avoidance, but a necessary pause. When someone accustomed to facing the camera suddenly withdraws, it often indicates deep reflection is underway. Public opinion in the entertainment industry is also divided. Some see Lily as a voice of conscience, reminding them of the complex truth of her private life. Others worry that excessive scrutiny might uncover new wounds. Fans, those who grew up with Rob Reiner's films, are in a state of confusion. They were sad, bewildered, and yearning for understanding. Online communities dissected every detail, searching for previously overlooked clues, as if every moment now held a harbinger of something. It felt like a real-life story unfolding, slowly but relentlessly. What is certain is that this story continues, not in a sensationalist way or with hasty conclusions, but as a journey of confrontation, with memories, with emotions, and with unanswered questions. And perhaps this very slowness is the most respectful way to show the people at the center of the story. Lily's words touched upon a long-hidden layer in Hollywood, the culture of silence. Her questions weren't directed at specific individuals, but delved into broader concepts: family, reputation, and the price of choosing to protect one another at all costs. Suddenly, loyalty ceased to be a self-evident truth, becoming something to be re-examined. As one late-night talk show host remarked, half-jokingly, "When a voice once considered trustworthy speaks, the entire city that lives by its stories is compelled to listen." Hollywood, built on scripts and myths, now faced a difficult test, not on screen, but in real life. A sense of anticipation pervaded, as if a new chapter were unfolding, heavier, deeper, and capable of shaking even the most firmly held beliefs. The very next morning, the atmosphere in Los Angeles was different, tense, unpredictable, like a simmering thunderstorm on the hillsides. The wave of interest in Lily Tomlin's revelations wasn't confined to the entertainment industry. It spread nationwide. The streets around familiar locations became unusually bustling. Media vehicles were everywhere. Fans gathered outside studios, carrying candles, posters, and messages expressing sympathy for the Reiner family. Online, forums and social media buzzed with countless theories, speculations, and analyses. No one was sure what would happen next, but many shared a feeling. The story wasn't over yet. According to rumors circulating within the industry, several individuals who had been close to the Reiner family began being invited to share their memories and experiences. It could be former assistants, longtime employees, or people who used to live nearby, people who said they noticed unusual signs in the period leading up to the tragedy. A few small details once considered insignificant are now being re-examined from a different perspective, prompting the online community to constantly piece together the fragmented information. Among them is the rumor about a little-known figure who occasionally appears at inexplicable times with an ambiguous work connection. While unconfirmed, this detail is enough to spark curiosity as the public tries to uncover the bigger picture that no one had previously noticed. At the same time, Lily Tomlin completely withdrew from the spotlight. Her representative issued only a brief statement, confirming she would not comment further at this time. For many, this silence doesn't mean retreat, but rather a deliberate pause. Some sources suggest that Lily cooperated cautiously with investigators, providing personal notes and mementos preserved over the years. If this information is accurate, It could shed more light on the context and emotions of those involved, rather than leading to hasty conclusions. In Hollywood, anxiety is palpable. In hallways, offices, and private meetings, whispers circulate about what might come to light, not just concerning a family, but the very workings of the industry. Reiner's story inadvertently reopened a long-standing but rarely spoken about dialogue: power, privilege, and the silent struggles behind the glitz and glamour. As one industry veteran observed, what Lily did was not simply recount a tragedy, but force people to look at how Hollywood protects itself. For her fans, Lily gradually became a symbol of honesty, a voice reminding them that the truth, however harsh, still needs to be heard. Hashtags spread rapidly, letters were sent, memorial services were held, and calls for continued inquiry echoed from many sides. However, behind all the commotion, a quiet question still hung in the air, a question without an answer, and perhaps it is this very question that continues to haunt the story. If Lily's revelations were just the beginning, the bigger question immediately arose. What exactly did Rob Reiner leave behind the curtain of glamour? And who would be the next person brave enough to speak out? Because one thing is undeniable. The silence that had shielded Hollywood for decades was showing clear cracks. Once that silence was broken, there was almost no turning back. In just a few days, the atmosphere of the entire city changed. The story of the Reiner family was no longer confined to entertainment headlines, but permeated every daily conversation. From morning coffee shops and work studios to late-night bars in Beverly Hills and even further afield in New York, people were talking about Lily Tomlin, not only because of what she had said, but also because of what she might know, but had never revealed. New rumors continued to surface, revolving around old data discovered during a review of Rob Reiner's personal files. According to unofficial sources, several highly secure files are being carefully examined, with the hypothesis that they may be related to previously lost notes. However, at this point, all details remain speculative, as no one has confirmed the origin, access time, or reason for the data's incompleteness. This uncertainty only adds to the unpredictability of the story. Meanwhile, Lily Tomlin's name continues to appear on global discussion charts. To the public, she is seen as a courageous voice, daring to ask questions many avoid. But on the other side, within the entertainment industry, the reaction is far from uniform. Some argue that these statements could stir up painful memories and shake the legacy built over generations. This division clearly reflects the sensitivity of the issue. A longtime professional cautiously remarked that what worries many isn't necessarily Lily's story, but the ripple effect. When one story is told, other stories, those that were buried or avoided, are forced to be revisited. And that's what makes the atmosphere so heavy. Nevertheless, for many outsiders, these words touched upon something very real. The story is no longer confined to the tragedy of a famous family, but expands into reflection on how people choose silence to maintain peace, on how love can sometimes be transformed into avoidance, and on the price of not speaking the truth. On social media, countless people shared personal experiences, claiming that these exchanges gave them the courage to confront their past. Meanwhile, there were also signs that not everyone wanted the story to be explored further. Several independent journalists and bloggers reported receiving vague warning messages, causing some content to suddenly disappear without explanation. This further fueled the feeling that invisible forces were trying to slow down the wave of interest. However, the landscape seems to have changed. As public attention increased, questions arose, and the story continued to develop in unpredictable directions. As one reporter observed, it all started with one person speaking out, and sometimes that alone is enough to trigger a chain of changes beyond anyone's control. Now, Things have gone far beyond a personal story. It has become a large-scale confrontation where no one can pretend they didn't know. The most frightening thing isn't what has been said, but the understanding that this story is far from over. Because if those electronic diaries truly exist, and if their contents are as Lily alluded to, then Hollywood could be facing one of the most serious earthquakes in its history. And in the blink of an eye, what originated from one woman's courage has shaken the foundations of an entire industry. What initially appeared as an emotional reaction, a moment of breaking the silence, has quickly evolved into something far larger. It has become a call for truth, for accountability, and for an end to the culture of cover-ups that has existed for too long in a world built on images and reputation. Headlines followed one another, questions piled upon questions, and the tension never subsided. The investigation continued, while the mystery of the supposedly lost diaries hung like a heavy cloud over Los Angeles. Each day brought new pieces of the puzzle, rumors, leaks, half-hidden statements, all drawing the public deeper into a truth that had been buried for far too long. Whether you fully believe it or remain skeptical, one thing is undeniable. This story has changed how people view reputation, family, and the fine line between loyalty and denial. Lily didn't just tell a story. She broke a cycle where silence, once considered protection, ultimately became the greatest danger. And in doing so, she forced the world to stop and listen. As the initial wave subsided, new questions arose. What would happen next? Who else might come forward? What further evidence was yet to be revealed? And how much more could Hollywood hide before the curtain fell? No one had the definitive answers, but it was clear the door had opened, and it wouldn't be easy to close it again. So, as we conclude this part of the story, let's take a moment to reflect. This wasn't simply a celebrity drama. It was a reminder of how far people can go to protect those they love, and how much harm silence can sometimes inflict. If you've watched this far, please support the channel by liking the video so this story can reach more people. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any further updates as the case continues to unfold. And leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on what really happened and where you believe the truth will lead us. Because this isn't the end. The story surrounding Rob Reiner, his family, and Lily Tomlin's shocking revelations is still unfolding. In fact, it's only just beginning. Stay tuned, because upcoming revelations could completely change how we view Hollywood's deepest secrets.